you guys. I'm going to go over the last of our reading comprehension strategies as we begin to wrap up learning about these strategies and learning what to do before, during, and after reading. Again, just to repeat it for the sake of repeating it, we are not just reading to read anymore. We are reading to understand. We're reading to understand. If you do not get anything else from this experience in learning about these reading comprehension strategies, I want you to remember that we are reading to understand. Reading to understand. Reading to understand. So, moving over to our PowerPoint, I'm going to scroll through. As we learned about last week, we learned about predicting and setting a purpose and activating our background knowledge. So, talking about what we already know. So, this week, we're going to start with our strategies for during our reading time. During our reading time. So, we talked about before reading last week. So, this week, we're going to talk about during our reading time and after we read. We have talked a lot about the before, and we really spent a lot of time in before. So now we're going to talk about what do I do while I'm reading a book and what do I do when I finish reading a book. So while I'm reading a book, one of the first things that I want to do is visualize. I want to create that movie in my head. I want to make that mental representation of what is going on in the book. That means that I am using the author's descriptive words to influence what the picture that I am painting inside of my head. So it's important for us to understand that as we are creating, as we are visualizing, we are creating a movie inside of our head. For visualizing, we are creating a movie inside of our head. So when I read the words, I'm creating an image inside of my head of what is going on in the text. What is going on in the text? I'm creating an image of what is going on in the text. This makes your reading more engaging, and it is a super easy strategy that helps you to get more involved in the story, and it brings the words off of the page for you. It lifts the words off of the page. So, what are you trying to say, Mr. Wade? I'm trying to tell you that when you are visualizing, you are pulling the words off of the page and creating a movie in your mind. The next strategy is connecting. So this is where we are going to bring the text into our perspective. We're going to throw our arms around the text and give it a big old hug, and we're going to bring it into our perspective. So there are three types of connections. Text to self. How does it relate to me personally? How does it impact my world and my environment that I am currently in? So what is the personal connection? So I think back to my book on Ruby Bridges. Where if the case for Brown versus Board of Education had never occurred and Ruby Bridges had never integrated a uni-ethnic school, I never would have been able to go to a school that was integrated. So I would have been in an all-black school, probably an all African-American school environment. Then I think about text to text. How does it relate to another book that I've read? So if I'm reading about sharks, I'm making a text to text connection about another book that I might have read about sharks. And then text to world. This is where our empathy comes in, our compassion. We're doing our text to world connections. We are figuring out how does this relate to other things that I know about what's going on in the world. Yesterday in class, I talked about the Flint water crisis. I could use that as a global predictor for a water pandemic and a water shortage that people all over the world are struggling to find clean water. And so that is an impact on the world. So let's also think about all of these things and let's bring them together. One of the biggest things that I like to say in our connection, as we're connecting the text, what we are doing is we are putting the pieces of the puzzle together, putting the pieces of our reading comprehension puzzle together. So I know that it's hard to really make those connect, especially if you're reading a book that you've never read before. It's hard to think about that in a global context. But one thing that I want you guys to be by the end of this year is really good global citizens. So you're not just concerned about the impact of things on you, you are concerned about their impact on the world at large. So connections makes your reading more personal. Now this skill is a little bit harder, but you can do that while you're reading or after you're reading. So the next thing that we're doing during our reading process is making inferences. I talked about this last week. Making inferences. We are making educated guesses while using context clues. It is similar to the predicting that we do at the beginning of a text, but it is not the exact same. So we're making inferences and we are reading in between the lines. Authors cannot put every detail into a book, or else books would be extremely long, extremely long. So we, in an effort to make them shorter, they force the reader to read in between the lines. Now, this takes practice. This does take practice. It's not super easy. But once you get it, you'll have a deeper understanding of what you read. And what did I say? We're not reading to read. We are reading to understand. Reading to understand. So we all naturally make inferences to fill in the gaps and make sense of things. And so that's what I want you guys to really practice as you're reading, as you're doing your homework this week, making those inferences, reading in between the lines. Now let's talk about our after reading. So after reading, one of the things that I want you to do first is to be able to summarize. Summarize. While we are summarizing, we are keeping it short, simple, and sweet. Short, simple, sweet. Short, simple, sweet. When we're summarizing it, we've got the word sum, which stands for, in our ELA context, shorter than the text. You should not have a 20-page summary if you read a 20-page book. Your summary should be about 2 paragraphs or 1 paragraph at that. Shorter than the text. You need to use your own words. Do not plagiarize, or else I'll have to send Miss Buchanan, the plagiarism police, to your door. And use main ideas only. We are only hitting the main points of the text. We do not want every little detail in our summary. So make a habit of summarizing while you're reading. So when you finish a chapter, you can do a 2-sentence summary, or when you finish a whole book, you can do a 10-sentence summary. Work on summarizing, because this is a key skill for knowing that you've comprehended the book. If you can't summarize, then 9 times out of 10, you probably have not comprehended it. Questioning. That's our next strategy. Questioning. You can do this while you're reading, before you start reading, or after you have finished your book. You got to ask those who, what, where, why, and how questions. So you're putting the text together, making those connections, and you're asking critical questions about what happened inside of the text. Coming up with questions is super easy, and it helps you to develop your comprehension skills. Again, we're not reading just to read anymore. We are reading to understand. And the last thing is repairing. So we're putting the text back together, putting gaps in the text back together. So anything that I do not understand, I got to piece it back together so that I can wholly understand the entire text. So in repairing, we're using small tasks to help us understand it better. So if there's a section in the book that I didn't quite understand, I'm going to reread it. If there's a word that I didn't get, I'm going to look it up. Or if there's something else, I'm going to ask for help. Rereading a passage helps us get through portions that are confusing, and it helps us to understand the text better. It helps us to put the text back together and understand the whole text all together. Because if you don't understand the whole text, and you're basically cutting a section out, and if you cut a section out, then you are limiting your comprehension. Knowing these strategies are going to make you a better reader. And not only that, you'll be able to do what? You'll be able to read for understanding. Not just for content, but for understanding. Thank you guys so much.